Hey, what's up, you guys? Bloody Jacob here to bring you another movie review. This time we're going to be talking about The Magnificent Seven. Of course, this movie just came out within the past couple of weeks, and I went and seen it the other day with my girlfriend, my dad, and my mom. But going to this movie was mainly for my dad, because my dad, he grew up watching, tons of westerns, TV shows, movies, things to, like Gunsmoke, Bonanza, the John Wayne films, Jimmy Stewart, just a bunch of people like that. So really, it's always kind of like a treat to go with him to movies that he cherished growing up, So it was really kind of special to see this with him, I think. Even though we had, two other people there with us. And, I went in, looking forward to it. I like westerns to an extent, not the way he does, but I do have a taste for westerns, and I do appreciate some of the older stuff, and I do like some of the newer ones as well. I'm a big fan of the 3:10 to Yuma remake with Russell Crowe and Christian Bale. So I thought this one would be a pretty fun time. It's getting good reviews. It's actually doing pretty well at the box office, and it has a pretty stellar cast. You got Denzel Washington. Who of course is one of the most capable actors of the past couple decades. Then you have Chris Pratt, who's one of the biggest stars on the rise right now. Then you have like Ethan Hawke, and then you have I can't pronounce his name, but Vincent, who recently played Kingpin or Wilson Fisk on Daredevil. And he was also in NCIS, and he's been in a bunch of other roles as well. He is the guy I was most looking forward to for sure, because you guys know how much I love the Daredevil Netflix series, and he just does such an amazing job in that role. He's a very wide-ranged actor, really. Especially seeing this movie, I can see the amount of range he has with his acting abilities, and the rest of the cast does pretty well too. And the premise, it is simple. It is basically what the original 1960 film was. Basically Denzel Washington, who plays Sam Chisholm, and others are recruited to take this town back, or to go after this very corrupt criminal who's just taking this town by the throat, and it's just really just running them through fear and intimidation. And of course they have to supply him and him off and stuff, or just work for him. It's essentially his town in his eyes. And so Denzel Washington is recruited, and eventually he comes across all the other of the seven, and as a way to sort of build their own sort of small army to fight back against the guy who is named Bogue when he returns. So that's really the premise of it. But of course, what was really with Denzel Washington's character, Chisholm, we find out he has more of a personal tie to Bogue than we initially knew about. And you kind of knew that something like that was going to come up. It turns out that, of course this is spoilers, there's spoilers in the title, so sometimes I forget to say it in the video, but spoilers. We find out that years earlier that Bogue was actually responsible for raiding the area where he had lived with his family, or at least with his mother and sister and such, and they were raped and then killed, and he was hung, but he somehow was able to survive that. You see the scar he has around his throat a little bit towards the end of the movie, around his neck anyway. And of course the success of this movie and how good it is kind of rode on two things. Of course, when people go to this, they want to see some really cool shootouts, and this movie definitely has that. But what really drove this movie's success to me, one way or the other, was how much these characters stuck out. Like I said, there's a good cast in place, but how fun and interesting are the characters? They succeed at it. Like I said, Denzel Washington, he's one of those capable actors around today. Chris Pratt, I liked Chris Pratt going into this movie. I wasn't, I'm not like crazy about him, not fangirling or anything, but I liked him as Star-Lord, and he's starting to really expand his filmography, and he impressed me in this movie. He plays a guy named Faraday, Josh Faraday. He's a gambler, and he also he likes to learn off magic and sort of mess with people's heads and stuff. That's why he sort of goes about surviving himself. And he does really well in this movie. He actually gets some seriously good character moments towards the end of the film. And then you have Ethan Hawke playing Goodnight, and he's just a sharpshooter, but you can tell he has like a lot of battle wear. He's pretty wary of these types of situations and such. With everything he's had to do in his background. And then you have a guy like Billy Rocks. I'm not sure if he was. Let me just look this up real quick. Yeah. Okay. So the guy who plays he's Korean, so he's this Korean type of assassin. He uses knives quite a bit, which is pretty cool. Of course, it sort of broke up all the shootings back and forth and stuff. This guy sort of going more melee style. Then you had this Mexican outlaw, and then you had Red Harvest, who was like a native warrior and such. So yeah, you really have a pretty diverse amount of characters and actors. My favorites in the movie were, of course, Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt. But like I said, Vincent D'Onofrio. That was my attempt to pronounce his name as Jack Horn. He's this tracker. He's hunted and scalped natives apparently. But as the movie goes on, you sort of get this scene from him where he actually talks about how he once had a wife and family, and he didn't really get to fully go into it as far as he was going to. But you sort of get the impression that chances are the natives probably killed his family at some point, so that's probably why he holds his own grudge against some of their people. And so there's a little dynamic in the background once in a while where him and where Jack Horn and Red Harvest are sort of butting heads a little bit, but they seem to sort of get along as it goes. They all sort of form this close connection with each other as they're drinking and such. And some really good scenes. You almost want to say there's too much time between some of the gunfights, but I actually thought it kind of worked. It made us care about these people, and made us actually care how they're going to plan this out and how they're going to try and pull off the defense of this town. And like I said, Vincent D'Onofrio, I'm just going to call him Kingpin, okay? Kingpin, he actually does pretty well. Like I said, he's a very wide-ranged actor. Of course, he has a signature deeper Kingpin voice on Daredevil, but on this, he completely changes that. He has this higher, surprisingly higher-pitched voice, which is almost like a little bit of comic relief that's in the movie. But then at the same time, he eventually has these scenes where he actually talks about respecting the men he's going to be fighting with, and that was actually a pretty touching scene, I think. And when he eventually is killed, unfortunately, towards the end of the movie, it's a pretty sad and tragic moment. But we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And the others do good as well. But I think the highlights were definitely Denzel Washington, Chris Pratt, and Vincent. But Ethan Hawke and the others do pretty well too. As far as the villain goes, Bogue himself, he's a corrupt industrialist. There's really not much to him, to be honest. But he really didn't need to be anything else. Of course, it would have been cool if he was a little bit of a deeper character. But it's a Western. It didn't need to really do much more. As long as they did well with the 7, that was what was going to make the movie, as I said. That's another thing people will say. The movie doesn't really do anything original or different compared to a bunch of other Westerns. That's kind of true, but I still feel like it excelled more than some of the other newer Western movies that came out, over the past decade or so. I still think it did a better job at this formula. So I do think it was still a success in that regard. And eventually, of course, there is a big shootout, and it is very intense, especially the final one. I personally started to really care about some of these characters, so when the shootout started happening, I was pretty worried, and my girlfriend was actually on the edge of her seat. So it really tells you how well it was actually done. My girlfriend, isn't really too fond of Westerns, but she really got into this. And going into this movie, my dad had seen the original film in 1960. But me going into this, I didn't know as much about it. I didn't know what kind of film it was really going to be. I didn't know if it was going to be more of like an over-the-top action, just like straight entertainment type of thing, or if it was actually going to be pretty self-serious when it came down to it. And yeah, well, it does have, of course, your shootouts that you would expect. It is pretty self-serious, and it does end up taking its characters and their fates pretty seriously, which I was happy with, I just think that really puts the film on another level than it would have been if it was just like a fun action movie. But it turns out to be a fun action movie and a seriously good, Western, I think. Shootout goes about as well as you'd expect. They do set up various traps and such. Like Horn, Kingpin's character is able to fire off a bunch of these, or detonate these dynamite, around the area and such, and they have this idea to lure some of them into the town to sort of ambush them in that way. But unfortunately, characters like Goodnight and the assassin are killed as they're in this church, because Bogue eventually brings out this Gatling gun, which of course is just completely devastating in this time period. Of course, Gatling gun's still very bad news right now, but especially then it was almost like having a missile in a way. So that was definitely intense. And then Jack Horn's death, Kingpin. Once I realized that some of these people were going to die, I was pretty worried about him. And unfortunately, he is killed. He is shot in the leg with an arrow by one of Bogue's, sort of paid off corrupt, native assassins. He's shot with an arrow in the leg, and as he's coming out, the guy is shot a few more times with a few more arrows before he finally goes down. But I love the scene, not only because of how intense it was and the sort of churn it gave me in my gut because of how much I like the guy, but he also sort of does look up into the sky before he finally just lets go and dies. I feel like he sort of made a peace with himself, perhaps. It's just unfortunate that Horn was probably finally starting to like Red Harvest, the guy on their side, but then of course he's killed by a native, so that kind of sucks. But we do see Red Harvest sort of avenge him, and he does kill the native that Bogue had paid off, which is good. So he avenges Horn, and as he says to the guy before he kills him, he's a disgrace to their people, of course. So I really appreciated that, and Red Harvest does actually survive, which is good. I said Goodnight and the Korean assassin were both killed. Faraday, Chris Pratt's character, you almost would expect, if you didn't know anything about it, you would expect Faraday and Chisholm, Denzel Washington, Chris Pratt to survive the film, but Faraday actually ends up, sacrificing himself. He leads us one last charge of the Gatling gun. He knew they had to take it out, or else they're just, done, no question about it. So he is shot quite a few times. All the men are shot down around him. But he's able to pull off this one last little magic trick. A guy actually lights a cigarette for him, which is actually a show of respect or slight honor before the guy's about to just shoot him in the head and pull the trigger. But Chris Pratt pulls out a stick of dynamite out of nowhere. Like I said, one last magic trick, and of course it goes off and it destroys the Gatling gun and most of the rest of Bogue's men. Now, of course, which is pretty surprising to see him kill off Chris Pratt, but it was really a well-done scene, and from what I heard, it was actually different than the original film, because the survivors are actually a little bit more unexpected than the original. With the original, from what I hear, the two main characters survive that you see within the first 5 minutes. But with this, Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt are played off as the main two, but only one of them survives. And then the Mexican outlaw also survives along with Denzel Washington. It was good to see Denzel Washington's character get that one-on-one with Bogue at the end, sort of to finally find justice for his family. But of course, Bogue's about to pull out this little pistol out of his boot. Of course, just shoot Chisholm in a very dishonorable way. But then we have Haley Bennett's character, Emma Cullen. I forgot to mention her, but she also does pretty well in this film. And she's one who hired the men because her husband is killed in the beginning of the movie. Trying to speak up against Bogue. But she is able to shoot Bogue before he uses the hidden weapon on Chisholm. So that was good, of course. But yeah, so overall, this is a really good movie. And of course, Horn, Goodnight, Faraday, and the others are buried at the end. They said they'll be remembered as legends. So I was really impressed with this, and we had a really good time with it. The shootouts were very good, especially the final one is very intense. There were some nice shots in this movie of the landscape, not as much as some others, but it still looked pretty nice, cinematography and stuff like that. Some really good performances, especially from Washington, Pratt, and D'Onofrio. I was particularly happy with, and I think it's just a really good time, for an old Western fan or someone who's just looking for a well done action movie, really. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I actually do plan buying it on Blu-ray for myself and my dad when it does eventually come out. I highly recommend this one. It's definitely the best movie in theaters right now, I think. And yeah, let me know what you guys thought about the movie if you've seen it. And overall, I'd probably rank this movie. I'd probably rate it about 8.8 or maybe a 9 out of 10, somewhere around there. But yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, like, subscribe, and peace.